A couple of days ago, I asked you guys in the community post to give me some more of your Battle Cats hot takes. I've gotten a lot more hot takes this time around, and these are a lot longer as well. For some of you guys who put multiple hot takes, I'm only gonna give my responses to any of the ones I have any input on, because some of them I don't have any opinions and I want to save some time on my end. Also, stick around till the end of the video, as I have a very important announcement to make at the end of this video. If you enjoyed me reading some of your Battle Cats hot takes, then why not give this a like, and leave a comment about your Battle Cats hot takes. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, as it helps me out in the long run and lets me know that this is the type of content you guys enjoy. The Crazed Cat stages are one of the best boss stages of all time. Each Crazed Cat feels vastly different from one another and makes it so much more entertaining. What I think about the Crazed Cat stages is I think they're really good at teaching the player about various different types of approaches to levels. Crazed Cat being the simplest, teaching the player about meat shielding, Tank teaching stage control, Axe teaching luring, Gross teaching player how to properly counter waves, Cow is a meat shielding to the extreme, Bird is about endurance, Fish and Lizard are about resource management, and Titan is about not needing a million meat shields sometimes. God Emperor Gladios is an underrated Uber because they don't give him some love. Also, his guaranteed knockback and slow against traitless enemies is very useful and could be a good general attacker, if you boost him of course. And it's better than Tourist Cat and Macho Crystal Cat in many different situations due to the fact that they're rare units that are single target and also have a long cooldown for a rare unit, like 30 seconds or something. Or you can also use either one of the two units together with Gladios. As someone who has used Gladios before, he definitely works well as a traitless crowd controller, and since his niche as a traitless crowd controller alone puts him high on my personal favorites. I think he's pretty underrated, mainly because not necessarily the fact that of his own competition as a traitless unit, but rather the fact that there's a couple of Dragon Emperors that are usually considered to be better than him. Atlantis Logistics is an extremely underrated unit, as it being very cheap, only costing 2,010 cents, dealing insane damage against zombies, over 100,000 at level 50, its survivability is also pretty great considering its dodge and survive, not to mention short cooldown for an Uber, which is only 51 seconds. Genuinely amazing, especially if paired with Housewife. The main issue with logistics I find is that on mixed stages, they can die extremely easily thanks to their rather low health pool. They only have 34,000 HP at that level, meaning they only really work on pure zombie stages. However, in pure zombie stages, they work extremely well. Labyrinth throws skill out the window. If you aren't a veteran player with lots of Ubers and collab units, doesn't matter how hard you try, you won't get far. Which sucks, since every other level or event in the game can be completed with a couple of good units, skill, and strategy depending on your progression. To be very honest, I didn't play Labyrinth all that much, and I only intend on playing it for something special. I won't mention it, but if you know, then you know. I don't know if it's a hot take, but some people write off units for the dumbest reasons. Even if some units get outclassed, the fun of the game is making strats with even the most unexpected units. Example being, when I was clearing 4-star Stories of Legend, I was surprised at how well Ovis, a unit from the Lion Pokepang series, did as a red tanker. He outright was the reason why I could hold off certain red enemies during my clears, and seeing people immediately write weaker units off because they can't perform as well as other units hinders the creativity in making lineups. I definitely think this is a major problem within the Battle Cats community. Ovis, who most people would write off as a weak unit, has about half the health of fried sushi, but also has about half the cost with the decent recharge. I did have Ovis in my original save, but testing Ovis out in some red stages, especially in 4 stars where you may not have a lot of options for red taking options, makes him somewhat useful. Cat 8 Behemoth goes hard. People keep underestimating it because their main target is zombie while having long distance. They can actually be used outside of zombies. Their huge LD with a small blind spot packed in with the nice damage is really good for clearing waves of peons. Also, they're still good against zombies since they have high health to tank if something burrows into their blind spot. Back when I didn't have a lot of Ubers, Catapult was my main LD Uber and he wasn't all too bad, though his force swing was a bit long. At least he was very tanky against zombies. I think the way Dark Cat's Eyes can be acquired at the moment is perfectly fine, as they are supposed to be a scarce and limited item. Getting them with Barons and Labyrinth is fine, and actually makes them challenging to acquire them. Dark Cat's Eyes are definitely an interesting resource. If you haven't beaten Stories of Legend and gathered some, don't spend them because they're the only way to get an Uber rare past level 50 without plus levels, but the fact that they are scarce makes them difficult to acquire. I suppose it is good that they're scarce because it really makes you think about which Ubers you should spend them on. Personally, I only intend on leveling up my Balrog to 60, then just holding onto them till I get a new suitable Uber. Detective Vigler is unironically the sexiest male Battle Cats character. I think the Lucifer fans would disagree with this one. Curse as a unit ability is incredibly overhated and can be incredibly useful. The main problem with Curse is that most enemies just don't really have abilities to speak of. Alien and relic enemies are really the only traits where Curse could be useful, since aliens usually rely on status effects, whereas cursing the cursor with twice the curse can help your crowd control units actually do their job. Richest Cat isn't just a combo slave, but also a good bounty hunter in the start of stages with unmagnified peons. I feel like most people don't realize that he can deal almost 25,000 damage at level 30, so when fishing for cash at the start, he can fish up some decent cash, especially if Can-Can's double bounty isn't unlocked. However, that said, if you have Can-Can's double bounty unlocked, it's just better to use them since they actually have some sort of survivability. Musashi Miyamoto is underrated. He does so much damage. At a glance, the damage he can deal is amazing against black enemies. The main issue, however, is their single target. This causes him to miss important enemies if the stage is peon heavy. Mighty Crystal Mu is the best for stalling and stacking, especially on Barons. It is actually really useful on Exile, Baron Seal, Zombie Pang, and Mega Muth. As for the stalling, simply protect Mu with weak meat shields and only allow Mu to kill the rest of the peons all by itself. Then once everything is dead and Mu is alive, just allow Mu to reach the enemy base. On big stages, there will be like 2 or 3 Mu's on the field. All I can really say is I know that people call Mu a base defender due to their literal 1 speed. Even with their 2.5 minute recharge, it usually isn't too difficult to get 2 of them out onto the field at once because of this. A lot of people in the Battle Cats community take YouTubers such as Xskull and Chillhala's opinions as facts and say that a unit is bad just because a big YouTuber said so. This is definitely a problem that most communities have, though I think since there isn't a lot of big voices in the English side of the Battle Cats community, this has led to a bit of an authority bias where only a few people's statements are taken as fact whereas everyone else's are drowned out. This isn't shade towards these creators, but it definitely is inevitable when they're the largest voices in the community. This is why I usually add statements about agreeing or disagreeing with my opinions in review videos, as it helps open further discussions about a unit or such. In terms of overall usage during the entire game, Ramen Cat is the best rare cat. I'd say Cameraman is probably a bit better than Ramen since she was really easy to stack with, and when doing 4-star stages, you are almost always going to have a 10% defense boost because Little Eraser is the meat shield for 4-star stages. Though I will agree that Ramen is top 3 here. Urashima Taro is a unit nobody talks about despite it being pretty good. He can tank a lot of damage from Angels and Blacks with the same amount of damage per hit as Can-Can. He can help out a lot on stages from Learn to Love to XP stages and plenty more. The cherry on top is his awesome design in his true form. He looks like if a cat tamed a pink Bowser and the fire breath just looks so cool. I think he's forgotten just because he's overshadowed by Kasajizo like the rest of the Ultra Souls. Gamirion is a very fun unit to use and was one of my first 3 Ubers in my main save. Against Angels and Blacks, they have 1.23 million effective health at level 30. Their damage isn't too bad either and is enough to bully Angels and Black enemies with a high knockback count. For those who have him and are still in the early game, no Plan A is basically a free win with this guy. This might get me cancelled, but Behemoth is a good sub-trait. It's true that it broke the red meta in the mid-game because of the courier incident, but actually did many improvements to the game. For example, no one farms cat fruit because you can get a lot of them like in the Heavenly Tower stages or user rank, but with the addition of the Behemoth Stone farming, it improved the way to obtain evolving materials. The areas where you get Behemoth Stones are also very good as they are only a one-time clear and it persuades the player to play, which is fun. The multiplying stats are also a pretty cool addition to the game, and if you say that you need a lot of Behemoth Stones, remember that you don't need to get all the true forms, just what you need. You can also change your time if you want and play the different maps, although this is not always a good idea, you can still do it. Now this is what I call a really good hot take. The main thing I'm going to focus on here is the Behemoth Stones. The main issue with the stones is that they take forever to get some of the units. For example, Mushroom Cat, who is one of the best eggs, requires 13 blue and 13 green stones, as well as a yellow stone. Mushroom Cat is also vital in not wanting to rip your hair out on Rajakan. On a more extreme example, Hitman Cat, who is in my personal opinion the second best egg, takes so much to true form. 8 purple, 9 red, 10 blue, 11 green, and 12 yellow is so much. Luza without a doubt is the worst example of needing too many Behemoth Stones. You need to acquire 20 of each stone. This could take a person upwards up to a month or 2 to acquire. They wouldn't be so bad if they didn't take forever to acquire, even for getting the meta eggs. If you want to read the whole thing, go ahead and pause the video, but I will just read their conclusion. Cats of the Cosmos is actually the most fun story chapter. I will now explain why. Cats of the Cosmos is very fun due to restrictions and the new trait introduced. Restrictions make you strategize a lot about what you're going to use to win. A great chapter that fits in well with the other main storyline chapters. Cats of the Cosmos is the most unique of the story chapters, and most of the points here are actually pretty understandable. I do think, however, that the enemy types within levels could have been a lot more diverse because a lot of them are just pure alien stages. It's my time to shine. Dual Terran stats are ridiculously underrated on Barons, though possibly just because of the difficulty of getting Christmas Terran. Also, on a different note, I think that Supercar is horrifically overrated for everything but Kamikaze Shield Pierce. I don't care how much damage that little shit has, too slow, too clunky, will always die to something absurdly stupid. I like Bullet Train because it has HP, I like Can because it has HP, I do not like Supercar. On that note, Slime narrowly evades being a disliked unit just because waves are so absurdly fun and I really genuinely despise Wan. I can't say anything about Terran, but for I think the best way to utilize their high damage and knockback is against bosses with the long force swing, along with that amazing shield pierce. For example, Zero Luza pushes extremely easily, and you want every opportunity to send him back even by a little bit. If you don't have Awakened Doron, then Supercar is the only other viable non-Uber option to knock him back. 3-star UL is overhated. It's a challenge suited for level 50 units where even then some strategies require genuinely skill to pull off, meant to test players with the guts and knowledge of the game to keep them playing after beating Uncanny Legends. Sure, it has some stages that stop working well with the simple copy and paste magnification change, but most of them don't change much and usually only require higher level units to beat. Ponos is aware of some of these issues and is introducing power creep that unfortunately all require behemoth stones like Luza and Chief Cat to mitigate the really unorthodox and or hard to get niche units for strategies such as talented Skelecat, limited gotchas like cat jobs, and specific uber rares. As someone who is currently doing starred UL, I will definitely say that a lot of the times the erasers are just not cutting it anymore. The pain really comes from the start of starred UL, since the buffs on 3-star are 200%, meaning you have things like 120,000 HP Sir Metal Seals, which take so ungodly long to kill if you don't have Luffalan, or the Sorrels that can tank a Bahamut hit until level 42, which if you're doing starred UL before actually beating Uncanny Legends, don't do that unless it's the first subchapter. As a person with Saber, I don't feel like Saber is as good as people say, though that might just be the case that I have better anti-floating units. It just feels like she lacks the amount of oomph that some other rushers have. The main appeal of Saber is her rather high DPS. While her actual damage may not be the best, her high DPS against floating enemies, along with the fact that she has a rather fast recharge rate, allows her to quickly pile on the damage. Haniwa feels somewhat lackluster given its base HP. If it had more HP and a faster speed, it would be salvageable. I think Haniwa works best on pure traitless stages, especially in the mid game, since at level 30, Haniwa basically has about 21,000 HP against traitless enemies, which is higher than basically all the meat shields at that point in the game. I also think Haniwa's slow speed can actually be used as an advantage. Since they're so tightly packed, the enemies have a harder time pushing, especially when layering with other faster meat shields. People expect way too much out of units now. Due to how much the game has been power crept, the game in that people are often accustomed to using broken units. A decent unit could be added and people will drag it through the mud and back because it's not as good as this one. I think the best rule of thumb to go with when it comes to new units is to see if the unit can do their job well enough. If they can, then they're a pretty good unit. Leadfoot Drive is nothing compared to Golden Guy, the stage before. I don't know why everyone talks about Leadfoot Drive, or maybe it's been power crept to hell, but I beat it second try with almost no difficulty. The main thing from what I understand about Leadfoot Drive is that there is a lack of setup time and the enemies are damage sponges. The two Lenores in the back basically serve as a stage length dropper. The enemies can also deal some surprisingly good damage. However, Golden Guy can be a difficult stage in and of itself, but becomes much easier if you wait out the Cories and take them out before the main fight. Mitama is very overrated, for Uncanny Legends at least. I feel like she is always cursed so she doesn't do anything. However, for Stories of Legend, she's pretty good and does her job well. If the Fest units ever get true forms and talents, they should give her curse immunity. I find that Mitama works really well in Uncanny Legends still, and the only enemy that I find that actually gives her issues is Lors, since he could just snipe her. Now for this one, we have a couple of hot takes that I do have something I want to say about for each of them, so let's just go right ahead and read them. I think fully talented Greater Balrog is probably the best Uber at the moment. His stats are incredibly high with a super cheap cost and quick cooldown. He has the potential to just flat out eliminate most enemies. People pretend his single target is a huge limitation, yet most meta units now are either LD, Surge, or Wave units, which clears the path for Balrog easily. I think that Gravici has one of the best combos, but outside of that, he is a unit who is incredibly awkward to use and is not OP anti-relic like people have said. Belly Dancer is better than Cactus and always will be. Dodge is better and you can boost and talent Belly Dancer, whereas Cactus is stuck at 50 and costs way too much to true form. I think that if a unit is just decent as a generalist, then it is nowhere near as good as a unit which is an effective specialist. I guess an example would be Emperor. Emperor, if it were not for the fact that Legaluga exists, is the second worst legend rare, being a jack of all trades. It's not useful when you compare it to specialists like Abyss or Ushi. Sure, you can maybe put Emperor in a lot of lineups, but his debuffs are inconsistent, DPS is low, animations are long and slow, and overall he makes little impact on the battlefield. I'm saying this as someone who owns the majority of units, including every legend rare besides Black Zeus. The single target is still an issue for sure, but yeah, it does tend to get a bit over-exaggerated sometimes. However, one group of enemies makes it almost impossible to use Balrog if they hit the field, being the Otter variants. Most surges or waves won't knock them back or kill them, and their range is just a bit too much for Balrog in the late game, especially Dark Otter. I do think that Balrog is a top 10 Uber due to his one club knockouts, but the fact that he has a hard time fighting enemies with a low knockback count and a higher range than him is the main downfall for him in some situations. For the second take, I need the Gravici owners for this one. I feel like Belly Dancer works better when there's a load of weak Aku enemies, but against a strong foe, if her dodge doesn't activate, she is basically dead in 1 or 2 hits. Her higher cost also means she has a higher risk factor when sending her in. Cactus is great for when you need something cheap to tank a hit or two. The idea of a generalist versus specialist is very much stage dependent. For mixed stages, you might want to bring a strong generalist or two. Stages where only 1 or 2 traits are an issue are definitely where the specialists shine. The main thing to remember is that generalists tend to have higher stats as to make them more powerful in more situations, whereas a specialist shines when the stage has their targets. At the moment, Dark Laser's talents are a waste of NP. Yes, you can use her to wave stack in 4-star stages, but Masked Grandmaster Cat exists and is a far more reliable alternative with better range. For Reds, Courier exists, and against Blacks, Talented CAT is the superior option. CAT and Courier's damages are great, however, the main issue with them is that Dark Laser could just have so much more to offer. In terms of health against her traits, I would legit call her a mini tanker. At level 50, she has over 85,000 health against red and black enemies. She also has an absurd 16,000 DPS normally and nearly 30,000 DPS against her traits. She is also extremely easy to stack and she will melt everything she touches. Dark Laser was already one of the only special cat food units who could hold up by the end of 4-star Stories of Legend, but with talents, every red and black stage is basically a free win. You can check out this short I did that explains why Dark Laser is mind-numbingly powerful. Kai is overrated. Yami is still dog water versus Aku. Awakened Doran's knockback isn't nearly as good as people say. Jianshi over Kyubey. Jelly looks better than Slime. I can't say anything about the first two, but Awakened Doran's knockback is definitely useful on pure relic stages or stages with relic backliners. Though if there is a powerful backliner like the Demon King, then it's probably better to just use Doran's second form. In most situations, Jianshi may be the better option, especially on stages where only 1 or 2 meat shields are needed, but on stages where you want to conserve as much cash as possible and or have loads of meat shields, then Kyubey is the better option. Like with most things, it comes down to the context of each stage. I think you're in the minority, bud, about saying Jelly looks better than Slime. Z materials are one of the worst things to be added into the game recently, and exist solely because Ponos does not understand how to manage material hoarding and can only combat it by releasing a new, harder to obtain material that bloats the game for both post-game and mid-game players. I mean, Z materials are already pretty easy to grind thanks to Protons, Neutrons, and Morons, since that stage can be done in less than a minute consistently, though I do think they'll be easier to obtain down the road. There's not one Uber that's actually bad, just mid or poorly made. Well, that really depends on how someone defines what it means to be bad. Being poorly made can make something bad. While all Ubers have their places to shine, some of them have a much harder time to get in that chance. And for our last hot take of the video, Merc and Cat CC is a good anti-metal. Sure, it may not have too high of an attack rate, but its fast recharge makes up for it. If Jurassic Cat has too low a range and too slow of an attack speed and can't get in fast enough, Merc is a good spammable version of that does just a little bit less damage. It can help stall Metal Cyclone, one-shot Metal Hippos, Doges, and Cyberfaces, which appear a few times throughout the Legend stages. Another factor is there aren't many anti-metal rushers besides Hayabusa. This is like a pocket version of that, like how Can is a pocket version of Balrog. The only major flaws are really just single attack and below average crit chance. While it's arguably worse than Jurassic Cat, it's still underrated. Merca before her true form was not a good unit. However, by making her recharge faster, giving her more health, and an actually decent crit chance of 20% makes her a reliable crit rusher, as she usually gets 2 or 3 chances to land a crit. While she may fall off late game, the fact that she has the stats for a reliable mid-game crit unit is pretty good, especially during 4-star Stories of Legend. I wanted to save these ones for the end because while I do think Misley Syndrome is a bit exaggerated, this video here that I'm going to put in the description goes more in depth about the issues with the ideas of Misley Syndrome. So, do you remember how I said at the start of the video I have something important to announce at the end? Well, I plan on opening a Discord server to the public once I hit 12,500 subscribers as a way for everyone in this community to come together and chat about loads of things and be a much easier way to interact with me. While the server is still a work in progress, I should have it ready to go by the time I hit 12,500 subscribers. I will make a video about it once I hit the goal and will have it linked in my about me if you were looking in there for stuff. Anyways, like the video if you thought this was interesting, and if you want to get that Discord server open sooner, then hit that subscribe button and comment down below your Battle Cats hot takes. Anyways, have a wonderful day.